Chapter 1293. Langya, take Yi Chen to choose a continent. After Yi Chen had talked with almost all the other Supremes, Supreme True Marshal instructed Langya. All right, Yi Chen, follow me. Supreme Langya nodded and looked at Yi Chen. Yi Chen followed behind Supreme Langya. In the sky above the 9 Revolution Star, Supreme Langya said while leading the way, the 9 Revolution Star has 81 continents. Some of them are public, and the rest can be chosen at will. Of course, one must choose the ownerless ones. Currently, there are 24 ownerless continents on the 9 Revolution Star: Wind Forest Continent, Fire Rock Continent, Sky Chen Continent. Each continent has its own specialties. Wind Forest Continent has more forests, and its winds are also quite strong. Moreover, these are not ordinary winds, but God-destroying gales that even 8th-layer life and death monarchs would have to struggle to traverse. Fire Rock Continent is a world of flames, and its rocks are all on fire. I'll choose Sky Chen Continent. The 9 Revolution Star was the largest 9th-grade life star in the 4 great life star fields. It was incomparably mystical. For countless years, countless legendary Supremes had laid down restrictive arrays and fortified the 9 Revolution Star. Even demigods had personally used their methods. Therefore, not only was the 9 Revolution Star's defense so strong that even Supremes couldn't destroy it, it also had many limitations. For example, the range of soul power exploration was very small. Yi Chen relied on Netherworld's sacred eye to see the location of Sky Chen Continent. Alright, I'll take you there. Supreme Langya continued leading the way. Not long after, the two of them arrived above the Tiantian continent. As one of the 81 continents on the 9 Revolution Star, the Tiantian continent was much larger than an ordinary life planet. There were countless small stars in the sky, as well as a relatively large sun and moon. They could light up the entire Tiantian continent. Good place. Yi Chen nodded. Supreme Langya said, 9 Revolution Star has 81 continents, and each continent is very mysterious. It all depends on one's preference. This is the place. That's good. There's a main palace on the Heavenly Star continent, the Heavenly Star Palace. You only need to refine the Heavenly Star Pearl in the Heavenly Star Palace and you'll be able to control the entire Heavenly Star continent. When other Supreme Beings enter the Heavenly Star continent, you'll know immediately. If you don't allow them to enter, they won't be able to enter. You can't break in? Yi Chen was puzzled. If a traitor appeared on the 9 Revolution planet and took control of an entire continent, wouldn't it be impossible to attack? Supreme Langya laughed and explained, you don't have to worry about that. The true Marshal Supreme controls the 9 Revolution's star hub. If there's a traitor, the true Marshal Supreme only needs to move his mind and the continent will be defenseless. It's useless even if there's a traitor. I see. From Yi Chen's point of view, the 9 Revolution Star wasn't just a simple life star. It was more like a planetary artifact, and the artifact was controlled by the true Marshal Supreme. Oh, I forgot to tell you. After you become a Supreme Being, you'll automatically have a level 8 life star. You can bring your friends and family there. Us Supreme Beings have a lifespan of over 100,000 years. After that, your children and grandchildren will be terrifying as well. Supreme Langya said. The human race didn't have many level 9 life stars. The dragon race had 1, the phoenix race had 1, and the monster race had 1. The human race only had a few, no more than 10, and they all had their own uses. There were many level 8 life stars, enough to satisfy all the Supreme Beings. That's for the best. Yi Chen was quite satisfied with obtaining a level 8 life star. Although he didn't have any children yet, the entire Yi family and Falling Dust Sword sect had a lot of people. After hundreds of years of reproduction, their numbers had multiplied by several times. After 100,000 years, his descendants might be in the millions. After all, not all of them were talented, and not all of them put their minds into bitter cultivation. With the backing of Yi Chen and Yi family, even more of them would put their minds into enjoying themselves. Yi Chen couldn't do anything about this. Resources were limited. It was fine to nurture a few 100,000 people, but to nurture tens of thousands, or even hundreds of millions, the entire human race didn't have enough resources. They could only drift with the tide. At present, Yichen already had a 3rd-grade life star, Flaming Fire Star, and a 4th-grade life star, Blue Fire Star. The latter was bestowed to him after he became an 8th-layer life and death sovereign. These 2 life stars would be useful in the future, allowing him to send some of his family members out and nurture their independence. Alright, I've told you everything I need to. You've just become a sovereign, so you should need some time to cultivate martial skills and increase your strength. I won't disturb you any longer. If you need anything, you can summon true Martial Supreme or other sovereigns from the Supreme Pavilion. Supreme Langya continued, as for your 8th-grade life star, there are people below to prepare it for you. You don't need to worry about it. I'll be troubling you then. Yichen indeed wanted to cultivate martial skills. After becoming a sovereign, his mind was constantly flickering with inspiration. After Supreme Langya left, Yichen flew to the center of Heavenly Star Continent and entered the Heavenly Star Palace. Inside, a pearl flickering with resplendent starlight floated. With a wave of his hand, the pearl flew into Yichen's hand, and he began refining it. No wonder the 9 Revolutions star isn't suitable for humans to live in. Heavenly Star Continent is full of dangers for those below the sovereign realm. Only the Heavenly Star Palace is safe. The entire 9 Revolutions star has been refined into a planet-grade artifact by countless legendary sovereigns and demigods since ancient times. Its might is boundless. While refining the pearl, Yichen gradually understood the mysteries of the 9 Revolutions star. However, if I bestow a trace of the pearl's power, I can stay on Heavenly Star Continent for a long time. In a short while, Yichen had completely refined the pearl. In the following days, Yichen immersed himself in sword arts. The current him was still lacking in many areas, the biggest of which was naturally sword arts. Cultivation knew no time. While Yichen was cultivating, rumors about him spread throughout the universe. At that time, there were too many 8th-layer life and death sovereigns of all races present. 1 spread to 10, 10 spread to 100, and 100 spread to 1,000. In a short year, the news of Yichen becoming a sovereign had reached the ears of most life and death kings. Everyone was astonished by Yichen's talent. It should be known that Yichen was only 600 years old, and the youngsters who became sovereigns within 1,000 years had a common title, 1,000-year sovereign. 1,000-year sovereigns had a high chance of becoming legendary sovereigns, and perhaps even demigods. In fact, in terms of cultivation talent, Yichen's talent was even better than many legendary sovereigns. However, nobody knew the future, and they could only say that there was hope. At the same time, the demons and the other demonic races started to calm down after suffering a grievance. However, the aura of war did not calm down. Instead, it was hidden even deeper. A storm was brewing. Chapter 1294. Tianshan Continent, on a boundless lake, a figure sat cross-legged on the surface of the water, motionless, drifting with the flow. After a long time, Yichen opened his eyes, stood up, and started to perform the 5-element sword art. The 5-element sword art was the most fundamental supreme sword art of Yichen, the essence of the extreme prosperity decline, boundless nature, and 5-element slash. The stronger the 5-element sword art was, the stronger the extreme prosperity decline, boundless nature, and 5-element slash would naturally become stronger. This was much more efficient than cultivating one by one. Of course, it was also much more difficult. No, I'm still lacking a bit. Shaking his head, Yichen continued to sit cross-legged and pondered the deeper essence of the 5-element sword art. Day after day, month after month, year after year, in the blink of an eye, it had been 12 years since Yichen came to the 9 Revolution star. In these 12 years, Yichen's 5-element sword art grew stronger every day, even gradually surpassing the sword burial art. After all, the sword burial art only contained 70% time profound, while Yichen's 5 elements profound had long reached perfection. It was just that his comprehension wasn't at the level of a sovereign, so he couldn't perfect the 5-element sword art. Now that he had become a sovereign, his comprehension had increased countless times, and he also had the essence of the 3 realms supreme's martial arts. If he didn't improve quickly, it would seem like he was stupid. While improving the 5-element sword art, Yichen didn't give up on the death slice and the sword burial art. Yichen already had more than 300 petals, catching up to Supreme Flower Burial. Of course, although Yichen's foundation was much stronger than Supreme Flower Burial, the sword burial art was created by Supreme Flower Burial. Some of the essences that had nothing to do with time and space profound weren't grasped by Yichen yet. Therefore, Yichen couldn't make the sword burial art his main sword art. The 5-element sword art was his foundation. Perhaps, in the future, he would change the sword burial art again, turning it into a sword burial art that truly belonged to him. The 15th year. On this day, above the lake, Yichen's eyes flashed with unprecedented brilliance. In an instant, it was brighter than the sun and moon in the sky, more dazzling. Wrong, it turns out that I was wrong before. The 5 elements are responsible for creation. The heaven and earth are divided into yin and yang give birth to the 5 elements. I used the destruction sword intent to perform the 5-element sword art, but it didn't match the 5-element sword art at all. Using the immortal sword intent to perform the 5-element sword art, although it wasn't domineering enough, it could perfectly perform the 5-element sword art and stimulate the power of creation, which was far more powerful than the destruction sword intent. After a moment of enlightenment, Yichen's eyes were filled with joy. In the past, any sword art he performed contained the destructive sword intent, and the immortal sword intent was usually used to protect his body. He would only use the immortal sword intent when he performed the 5-element sword art. That was why the defense of the extreme prosperity sword art was so powerful. Unfortunately, the extreme prosperity sword art was just a side branch of the 5-element sword art. How could it compare to the vastness and profoundness of the 5-element sword art? For example, the extreme prosperity sword art was a weapon, while the 5-element sword art was the human body. No matter how powerful the weapon was, it could never be as powerful as the human body. This is the real 5-element sword art. Moving his body, Yichen performed the 5-element sword art. This time, the 5-element sword art was less domineering, but more profound. Rumble. On the boundless lake, a piece of land was being born rapidly. Inside the land, all kinds of metals were being brewed, forming into a ball. On the land, a river was born. With the river as the center, patches of green appeared. Flowers and trees grew crazily. With the appearance of flowers and trees, the nutrients of the land were being extracted, and the ground started to heat up. Magma appeared, and then volcanoes erupted, and flames burned the sky. All of this was the sword momentum, the materialized 5-element sword art. Enemies who were in the range of the sword momentum would feel powerless, as if they were fighting against the heaven and the earth. Yichen could continue attacking, or he could leave at any time. My 5-element sword art, even though I haven't fully displayed the ultimate essence of the 5 elements profound, it is still my highest achievement. It's a pity that I don't have an opponent to exchange pointers with. Yichen was clear that only by exchanging pointers could he find out where he was lacking. In the blink of an eye, another 3 years passed. Under Yichen's study, the 5-element sword art had become increasingly profound. Towards the end, even he himself couldn't find any flaws. My horizons are limited. Training in seclusion alone is useless. Shaking his head, Yichen looked up at the sky. His figure flickered, and he instantly arrived in the sky above Sky's star continent. In the next moment, Yichen rushed toward Supreme Pavilion. Supreme Pavilion, many people came and went, and Supremes would come here from time to time. Of course, there were also some high-ranking members of the human race. Their cultivation bases were all at the 8th layer of life and death realm. Greeting the passing Supremes, Yichen arrived at the 9th floor of Supreme Pavilion. This was where the supreme weapons of the human race were stored. Newly ascended Supremes could obtain a set of supreme weapons for free. If they were damaged, they would have to make enough contributions to get them again. One could exchange for treasures, or they could do some big things for the human race. Apart from supreme weapons, there were also some supreme materials on the 9th floor. I'll choose a supreme armor first. Yichen walked toward the supreme armor treasury. Supreme Yi, you're here to choose a supreme weapon, right? I'm Sima Jingwan, the manager of Supreme Pavilion. There was someone working on the 9th floor of Supreme Pavilion. It was a beautiful woman. Upon seeing Yi Chen, her eyes brightened. Although she had never seen Yi Chen before, it didn't hinder her from seeing Yi Chen's image. It would be a lie to say that she wasn't curious about such a young and newly ascended Supremes. Of course, she was even more in awe. Yi Chen nodded. Can I go in? Of course, of course. This way, please. Sima Jingwan promptly nodded and stepped aside. When Yi Chen entered the treasury, Sima Jingwan couldn't help but whisper, he's really too young. So young, yet he's already a pillar of the human race. I wonder how he cultivates. The Supreme Armor Treasury was a completely different world. There were a large number of Supreme Armors stored inside. With a rough look, there were no less than 50 or 60 of them. Some were already very broken, while some were still very new. White Tiger Armor, 7-Star Annihilation Armor, Sun Moon Armor, Milky Way Armor. Yi Chen walked past the Supreme Armors and memorized all the information about them in his mind. After walking one round, Yi Chen pondered for a moment and came to the side of a golden armor. This Supreme Armor was called the Wind Cloud Armor. Wearing this armor could increase one's defense by more than 100 times and could also absorb a large amount of attack power. It turns out that it's so difficult for a Supreme Being to kill a Supreme Being. For example, a powerful Supreme Being could kill a normal Supreme Being, or a Super Supreme Being could kill a powerful Supreme Being. It's too difficult to kill a Supreme Being at the same level. The Supreme Armor can completely block more than 90% of the attack power. I wonder how terrifying the Divine Armor above the Supreme Armor is. Yi Chen's thoughts were quick. He thought of Supreme Being from the Supreme Armor. Chapter 1295. With the Wind and Cloud Armor, Yi Chen walked towards the Supreme Weapon Treasury. There were a lot more Supreme Weapons than Supreme Armors, about 100 of them. Just like the Supreme Armor Treasury, the Supreme Weapon Treasury was a whole new world. Each Supreme Weapon was as big as a mountain, and the smallest one was thousands of meters long. The terrifying pressure from the weapons filled the air, causing Yi Chen to hold his breath. These weapons are the same as the armors. They are all of normal size and not enlarged. If they were enlarged, they might even be larger than an ordinary planet. How many Paragon-level materials would be required to refine them? I'm afraid that's also the reason why there have only been 100 or so Paragon-level weapons in the past countless years. Yi Chen took a deep breath. He had originally planned to learn how to forge Emperor-grade swords before the war, but now it seemed a little unrealistic. There seemed to be a lot of Supreme weapon materials in the Supreme Pavilion, but who could be sure that they could forge a Supreme sword on their first try? They had to increase the success rate first, and the amount of Supreme weapon materials needed was inestimable. No hurry, I'll learn how to forge Emperor-grade swords first, and then I'll learn how to forge Supreme swords in the future. With this thought, Yi Chen began to choose Supreme sword. There weren't many swords in the treasury, only 8 in total. They were Blood Sword, Brilliant Divine Sword, Innate Overlord Sword, Thousand Soft Divine Sword. Without much hesitation, Yi Chen chose Brilliant Divine Sword. Brilliant Divine Sword was 9,800 meters long, and its entire body was white gold with a golden line in the middle. It looked noble and sharp, and when held in one's hand, it felt like this sword could fly out and kill at any time. I need a large amount of Emperor-grade materials to forge artifacts. May I know what your requirements are? Leaving the treasury, Yi Chen asked the beautiful woman called Sima Jingwan. Sima Jingwan answered honestly, Supreme Pavilion has a rule that Supreme weapons only need to pay 50% of the price. May I know what Supreme Yi needs? 20 million kilograms of Source Stream Iron, 80 million kilograms of 7-Star Iron, 500 million kilograms of Star Iron. Yi Chen's next words startled Sima Jingwan. These materials were all Emperor-grade materials, and they were extremely valuable. She didn't know if Yi Chen would be able to take out so many Yuan stones. Of course, a Supreme Being's status was noble, so he could owe them for now and return them in the future. A total of 300 billion Yuan stones. Sima Jingwan hesitated for a moment and said, N. Faintly nodding, Yi Chen took out 3 storage rings and handed them over. Each has 100 billion yuan stones. 3 rings for a total of 300 billion yuan stones. Take a look. The current Yi Chen didn't lack yuan stones. In the Azura world arena, he had killed a lot of 8th layer life and death heavenly sovereigns, as well as a fair number of quasi-sovereigns. Just the yuan stones in their storage rings added up to 500 billion, not to mention other treasures. Otherwise, even a newly ascended sovereign might not be able to take out so many yuan stones. No need. How could Sima Jingwan not trust a sovereign? Any sovereign would disdain to take advantage of such a small matter. If this matter were to spread, she would lose face. Leaving the Supreme Pavilion, Yi Chen ran into Langya Sovereign. Brother Yi, what a coincidence. I was just about to look for you. Langya Sovereign beamed. Yi Chen asked curiously, what's the matter? Bronze Sovereign, Langya Sovereign, and Qinheart Sovereign were the 3 strongest sovereigns of the human race. Their strength was second only to super sovereigns. Among them, Langya Sovereign and Qinheart Sovereign were the twin stars of the human race. The 2 were the youngest and had the greatest potential. They would certainly become super sovereigns in the future. Of course, Yi Chen's degree of monstrous talent was even higher than the 2, which was why he was so highly regarded. Langya Sovereign said, I want to invite you to a gathering I'm holding. Let's get to know each other. I wonder if Brother Yi has the time? After becoming a sovereign, one would enter seclusion for many years. Therefore, gatherings were often held to discuss one's attainments. Apart from this, mutual comparison could also promote mutual improvement. All right. Yi Chen agreed without hesitation. Brother Yi is indeed a straightforward person. Langya Sovereign was in a good mood seeing that Yi Chen was giving him face. In fact, the people he invited this time were all powerful sovereigns. There were humans, barbarians, and giants. Yi Chen's battle with Supreme Demon River's projection was barely at the level of a sovereign. In addition, his fame was like the sun in the sky. Many sovereigns wanted to know more about him. How about this? We'll meet in my greedy wolf continent a week later. Langya Sovereign continued. I'll do as you say. After parting ways with Supreme Langya, Yi Chen returned to Heavenly Star Continent. In the next 7 days, Yi Chen did not forge any sovereign-grade sword. He read the books on forging sovereign-grade swords one after another, trying to understand the meaning behind them. 7 days later, Yi Chen rushed to Greedy Wolf Continent. This time, Supreme Langya invited more than 10 sovereigns. There were 5 from the human race, including the Bronze Sovereign. Beside him was the Phoenix race's sovereign, Ice Phoenix. The barbarian race's sovereigns were like savage gods. The giant race's sovereigns were the size of mountains. Yi Chen had never seen many of them before. Clearly, every race would have some hidden supremes. Even the human race had some supremes in seclusion, or had reached the end of their lifespans and left to search for opportunities. Unless it was a matter of life and death, the entire power of a race would not be revealed at once. Supreme Langya, this is the newly ascended Supreme Langya? He has a strong foundation, but how strong is he? The giant race's Supreme Mountain Sea squinted his eyes and looked at Yi Chen. Supreme Mountain Sea was 400 feet tall. Supreme Langya looked like a small person sitting beside him. Supreme Langya explained, Supreme Yi was able to exchange more than 10 moves with Supreme Devil River's projection when he first became a sovereign. In the end, Supreme Devil River's projection couldn't even hurt him. Now that more than 10 years have passed, I'm afraid Supreme Yi's talent has increased by more than 1,000 times. Even Supreme Devil River's true body won't be a match for him. Supreme Savage said, You can't say that. Supreme Devil River is just an ordinary person among the sovereigns. I remember Supreme Langya, when you first became a sovereign, you were able to fight against an ordinary sovereign without losing. Supreme Langya smiled bitterly. At that time, he had the supreme armor and weapon in his hands. Moreover, he had been in seclusion for a few years. On the other hand, Yi Chen was different. He had nothing and was ambushed as soon as he came out of Azura world. Just as Supreme Langya was about to explain, Yi Chen arrived. My apologies, Yi Chen is not late, right? Supreme Langya quickly stood up. Not late, not late. The gathering hasn't officially started. In a gathering between sovereigns, the food and drinks were treasures that even sovereigns wouldn't dare to dream of. For example, the 7-colored divine fruit, which could only be found in the heavenly river. The black fruit was the gloomy dark fruit from hell. The meat was even more amazing. It was made from the roasted meat of some cosmic beasts and contained powerful energy. Supreme sovereigns were the strongest group of people in the world. They were like the immortals in Yi Chen's imagination. They were above the mortal world, and even their food and drinks were different. Chapter 1296. Supreme Langya, your heavenly blue bull's meat is amazing, it's delicious. Paragon Mountain Sea loved meat the most. In front of him was a plate with a diameter of 100 meters. On the plate was a huge beef thigh. Paragon Mountain Sea picked up the beef thigh and took a big bite out of it. Grease dripped from his mouth. This Heaven River python's meat isn't bad either. Like Supreme Mountain Sea, Supreme Savage also liked meat. In fact, both the giants and barbarians liked meat. Humans, on the other hand, had a balanced diet. Supreme Langya smiled. It's not easy to catch a heavenly blue bull. There are countless caves in the traceless stream. As long as they run into one, they won't come out even once in 10,000 years. Heaven River pythons are easy to catch, but the heavenly river is too dangerous. There are strong and weak heavenly river pythons. From the weakest to the strongest, there are beginner heavenly river pythons, middle heavenly river pythons, high heavenly river pythons, quasi-heavenly river pythons, first heavenly river pythons, and second heavenly river pythons. Indeed, we may be supremes, but some places are still dangerous for us. Supreme Bronze nodded. He couldn't help but think of Supreme Gold. Since the beginning of the gathering, Yi Chen had remained silent, listening to others and eating his food. As a newly ascended sovereign, he didn't want to be too conspicuous. Moreover, the food before his eyes was indeed out of the ordinary. He, who usually didn't care much about food, couldn't help but eat a bit more. He even wondered if he should bring some back for his parents and girlfriend. Thinking up to here, Yi Chen chuckled. He really looked like a country bumpkin who had never seen the world. Supreme Ice Phoenix was sitting not far from Yi Chen. Seeing Yi Chen smile, she answered, Supreme Yi, I heard that you're friends with our Phoenix Clan's junior, Fire Sparrow? Yi Chen nodded. Yi Chen wasn't surprised that Supreme Ice Phoenix knew he was friends with Fire Sparrow Emperor. He just needed to ask around. It's Fire Sparrow's good fortune to have a friend like you. Supreme Ice Phoenix continued, Oh right, where are you from, Supreme Yi? The human race originated from the living worlds. Many amazing geniuses also came from the living worlds. Yi Chen was not afraid of others knowing that he came from Elysium. Elysium, he said. Elysium? The Ice Phoenix Supremacy was very surprised, but then came to a realization. What's wrong? Yi Chen saw some clues. The Ice Phoenix Supreme said, Many years ago, before almost all the supreme martial artists were born, there was a supreme martial artist called Guzun. He was one of the strongest supreme martial artists at that time. It was said that he was even stronger than supreme martial artist. After him, there was another supreme martial artist called Qi Tianzun. He was also extremely powerful. They came from a world with life, the Elysium you mentioned. After saying that, the Ice Phoenix Supreme looked at Yi Chen with a slight change in her gaze, a change that even she herself didn't notice. Guzun Qi Tianzun? Countless thoughts flashed through Yi Chen's mind. It's ancient emperor and Qi Tendi. Finally, Yi Chen regained his wits. These two were the first and second titled monarchs of Elysium. They were revered by tens of thousands of people. However, Yi Chen felt that it was reasonable. Ancient Emperor's cultivation base was at the 9th layer of life and death realm. Although Qi Tiandi's strength was unknown when he left Elysium, he should also be at the 9th layer of life and death realm. 9th layer was a supreme. With the talents of Ancient Emperor and Qi Tiandi, it wasn't difficult for them to have such a reputation. All of a sudden, many questions flashed through Yi Chen's mind. Were Ancient Emperor and Qi Tiandi dead or not? Life and Death Kings had a lifespan of 100,000 years, but the Supreme Martial Artist's lifespan was far longer. It was not impossible for them to live for millions of years. If they were still alive, Where did they go? Moreover, if ancient Emperor and Qi Tiandi didn't die, why did they let the demons and evil spirit race block the exit of Elysium? With their lifespan, they could easily guard Elysium for hundreds of thousands of years. Apart from that, although humans were weaker than demons, they wouldn't sit idly by. There were too many questions. Yi Chen had a feeling that Elysium was certainly not an ordinary world with life. There must be a deeper reason why humans sat idly by in Elysium. Now that he thought about it, the demons' abandonment of Elysium was not as simple as he had imagined. After a long while, Yi Chen shook his head. He had just become a supreme, and there were too many things he didn't know. There was no need to be anxious to know everything. As time passed, he would know what he needed to know. Supreme Yi, are there any records of these two in Elysium? Supreme Ice Phoenix asked. Yi Chen said, they were the earliest supremes of Elysium. Supreme Ice Phoenix could tell that Yi Chen didn't know much. As time passed, the atmosphere of the gathering became more and more lively. Everyone, this time, I have invited everyone here just to eat and drink. I believe that everyone has not enjoyed themselves to the fullest. So, next is the time to compare notes. Everyone can invite opponents to test their martial arts. I will start first. Who is willing to compare notes with me? Supreme Langya stood up and said boldly after drinking a mouthful of wine. Discussions arose everywhere. Everyone had been waiting for this moment. Supreme Langya, I, Hong Ling, will spar with you. Supreme Hong Ling of the giant race stood up. All right, please advise me. Supreme Hong Ling was one of the few powerful supremes of the giant race. He was slightly shorter than the mountain and sea supremes, but he was still 380 meters tall. The battle between the two was brilliant. They fought from the sky to the ground, from the land to the lake. Fortunately, the greedy wolf continent was very sturdy and could withstand the two's blows. In the end, Supreme Langyo won slightly and stopped while he was ahead. Thank you for letting me win. Supreme Langya cupped his fists. My skills are not as good as yours. I have nothing to say. Supreme Hong Ling did not feel ashamed. He went back and continued to eat and drink. Next, it was Supreme Ice Phoenix's turn. Her opponent was a female supreme of the barbarian race, Supreme Seven Moons. In the end, the two were evenly matched. If they continued to fight, it would inevitably hurt the harmony. Supreme Yi, you are a new supreme. However, I Dongting would like to spar with you. Supreme Dongting of the barbarian race flew out from his seat. His eyes swept around and finally fell on Yi Chen. He invited him to spar with him. Supreme Ice Phoenix reminded, Supreme Dongting's strength cannot be underestimated. Be careful of his heaven-collapsing earth-splitting leg. Supreme Dongting was famous for his leg techniques. His strength was not considered as a top supreme. However, it was hard to say if his opponent was Yi Chen. After 15 years, no matter how much Yi Chen had improved, it would be limited. In that case, I shall accept your invitation. Yi Chen also wanted to know how strong he had become. In a flash, Yi Chen appeared in front of Supreme Dongting. Langya, how about we make a bet? If Supreme Yi loses to Supreme Dongting, you will give me all of your blue sky bulls. Of course, you can choose not to bet, Supreme Mountain Sea suddenly said to Supreme Langya. Supreme Langya was stunned. He said, what if Supreme Yi wins? Win? Supreme Mountain Sea thought for a while and said, I will give you one of my Starry Sky Bear hounds. How about that? All right, it's a deal. Starry Sky Bear hounds were a mysterious giant beast. Their habits were similar to dogs of the human race. The 3 Starry Sky Bear hounds raised by Supreme Mountain Sea all had the strength of ordinary supreme martial artists. It would be a great fortune to get one. As for Yi Chen losing, Supreme Langya would not suffer a great loss. At worst, he would just have to spend some effort to catch some in the traceless stream. Chapter 1297. The fight began. Master Dongting launched an explosive kick, which was so fast that even time and space seemed to be reversed. If this kick landed, it could even destroy an ordinary living planet. Seeing this, Yi Chen operated the Green Lotus Sword domain, stabilizing the surrounding spacetime, preventing it from being affected by the reversal of spacetime. At the same time, he pulled out the brilliant divine sword and slashed down with a fierce and sharp aura. Boom! The iron foot and the sword collided. A large space-time crack appeared and a small hill nearby was blown up. Okay, take another 100 kicks. Using the momentum, Sovereign Dongting spun his body. His 2 legs were like a storm, a meteor shower, a tsunami, and a volcanic eruption. Kicks after kicks were launched at Yi Chen without any gap in between. If an ordinary sovereign were to encounter such a crazy chain of kicks, they would be kicked to death before they could even react and use their best moves. So what if I take another 1,000 kicks? Yi Chen did not use any unique skills. The basic sword skills were superb. Every move seemed ordinary, but they were perfect. Whether it was the operation of sword energy, the flow of qi and blood, the strength of muscles, or the coordination of breathing, they were all flawless. Vaguely, there was also the integration of heart power and 5 elements ultimacy. Clank, clank, clank. After a series of explosions, Master Dongting was sent flying. In terms of fighting skills, Master Dongting was no match for Yi Chen. Before he finished his 100 kicks, Yi Chen found a flaw and slashed at his chest. Of course, this was just an ordinary sword skill. It was not even enough to tickle Master Dongting. Mountain Sea, looks like you are going to lose. Supreme Langya revealed a faint smile. Not necessarily. This is just the beginning. Master Mountain Sea adjusted his posture and squinted his eyes. Without a doubt, he had underestimated Yi Chen. Master Dongting was many times stronger than Demon River. But judging from the situation, it was obvious that Yi Chen had the upper hand. Next, it would depend on each other's unique skills. Master Yi, I am going to use my full strength. Master Dongting twisted his neck and lifted his right leg slightly. A powerful force enveloped Yi Chen from afar. Just make your move. The Huang Divine Sword vibrates at a special frequency, and the sharp sword momentum also locks on the Supreme Master of Dongting Lake. Heaven collapsing, earth-shattering kick. Death slash. Almost at the same time, the two of them launched their own unique skills. The sky-collapsing and earth-splitting kick of Dongting supremacy was extremely domineering, and the horrible power spread out like a spider web. It could be seen that time and space were collapsing, and the earth, water, fire, and wind were boiling, as if the world had fallen into doomsday and carried out the last riot. Rumble. As the wind and clouds surged, Yi Chen and the Dongting supremacy both flew backward. What a powerful leg technique. There is a sword mark on Yi Chen's clothes. Just now, the strength of the Dongting master's leg was transmitted to the Huang Divine Sword. The powerful force made the sword lose control and cut back to him. If it were not for the wind and cloud armor, he would have been cut in half by the sword and suffered some minor injuries. Supremacy of Dongting is even worse than Yi Chen. Her clothes are full of holes and she looks like a beggar. Supremacy of Dongting, take a sword from me too. It is impolite not to reciprocate. Yi Chen leaped up and landed on the top of Supremacy of Dongting's head and slashed down with his sword. 5 elements sword technique, 5 elements slash. Good fella, block for me. Supremacy of Dongting wanted to dodge, but an unprecedented 5 elements sword technique shrouded him. He crossed his arms and used Supremacy of Dongting to block the attack. Clang. A powerful shockwave radiated in all directions, and Supremacy of Dongting was nailed into the ground. Mountain Sea, just admit defeat. My brother Yi is not an ordinary person. After the shock, Langya looked at Supremacy of Mountain Sea with a smile. He is still very happy to win a starry sky bear dog. Supremacy of Mountain Sea drank a mouthful of wine gloomily. A starry sky bear dog is a starry sky bear dog. Don't worry, I, Mountain Sea, will not do anything that goes back on my words. As he spoke, he looked at Yi Chen with a new gaze. It seems that he is indeed not an ordinary genius. Supremacy of Dongting has been a supreme for 100,000 years, but he is actually not a match for a newly advanced supreme. Maybe he really can become a legendary supreme. The Bronze Sovereign's eyes lit up. The disappearance of the Golden Sovereign was a regret of the Dragon Clan. With the Golden Sovereign, the human clan had 3 supreme sovereigns. The difference between having a supreme sovereign and not having one was huge, especially for the Dragon Clan. If Yi Chen can become a legendary supreme, with his relationship with Su Jing, he will definitely help to find Golden Supreme. Gravel flew everywhere, and supremacy of Dongting flew up from the depths of the ground. It hurts so much. This sword is really powerful, I can't block it. Supremacy of Dongting felt dizzy, and his breath was unstable. Although Yi Chen's 5 elements slash didn't hurt him, it shook his bones to the point that his blood was boiling. Thank you for letting me win. Sheathing the brilliant divine sword, Yi Chen cupped his fists. A loss is a loss. There is no need to let me win. The barbarians always say 1 thing is 1, and 2 is 2. They are not as fastidious as the human race. Returning to his seat, Supremacy of Ice Phoenix suddenly said, Supremacy Yi, you didn't use your full strength just now, did you? Yi Chen smiled. It is not a battle of life and death. There is no need to be so serious. The full power of the 5 elements slash was much more terrifying, but at the last moment, Yi Chen only used 1,000th of its power. If he really used his full strength, even Supremacy of Dongting would be seriously injured. The gathering went on for 3 days and 3 nights. During this time, Mountain Sea Supremes exchanged pointers with Bronze Supremes, Savage Supremes and Zitherheart also exchanged pointers, but no one else went to exchange pointers with Yi Chen. Everyone was quite friendly towards new Supremes. Continuous exchanging pointers would make people feel that it was a bit deliberate. At the end of the gathering, Langya Supreme gave Yi Chen 3 sky blue oxen, 10 sky river pythons, and many precious wines and fruits. Yi Chen didn't refuse and accepted it. In the following days, Yi Chen started learning how to forge Emperor-grade swords. His days were peaceful. I finally forged a top Emperor-grade sword. Raising the crimson sword in his hand, Yi Chen couldn't help but sigh. In the past 3 years, he had already used 90% of the materials, which was equivalent to 300 billion yuan stones. He had spent 270 billion yuan stones in exchange for hundreds and thousands of Emperor-grade swords. This crimson sword was the only peak Emperor-grade sword he had succeeded in refining. Did you succeed? Outside the room, Su Jing walked in. Yes. What do you think? Seeing Su Jing come in, Yi Chen handed the sword to her. In these 3 years, Murong Qingqing and Su Jing would often come to Tianshan continent to stay for a while. Yi Chen had already given them a strand of the Tianshan Pearl's power, so they wouldn't be in any danger. It doesn't seem to be any worse than my purple golden spear. Su Jing took out her top-notch Emperor-class treasure and compared it. Yi Chen smiled. It's still not good enough. But next time, I'm confident that I can forge an even better top Emperor-grade sword. Suddenly, Yi Chen's expression changed. What's wrong? Su Jing asked. I'm going to the Supreme Pavilion for a while. Wait here. In a flash, Yi Chen appeared in the sky above Tianshan continent and rushed towards the Supreme Pavilion. Just now, Supreme True Marshal suddenly sent a message to him, asking him to go to the Supreme Pavilion. Chapter 1298. In the meeting room of the Supreme Pavilion, there was another Supreme Master called Lai Hua sitting there besides Supreme True Marshal. Yi Chen, you're here. Supreme Yi. Seeing Yi Chen's arrival, Supreme True Marshal and Supreme Fire stood up. True Marshal Lai Hua. Among the Supreme Masters, they usually called each other by their titles. Yi Chen didn't have a title yet, so he could call him Supreme Yi or by his full name. Sitting down, Yi Chen asked directly, True Marshal, why did you call me here? Did the demons do something? Supreme True Marshal smiled. No, even if the demons wanted to do something, they wouldn't do it so early. I called you and Lai Hua here to assign a task to you. Patrol the Black Wind Stream. Black Wind Stream? It was the first time that Yi Chen had heard of this term. Supreme Fire wasn't surprised at all. He explained to Yi Chen, the Black Wind Stream is an important place of the human clan. The patrolling duty is rotated every 500 years. This time, it's our turn. After Supreme Zhen Wu and Lai Hua's explanation, Yi Chen finally learned that there was a very secretive forbidden place of the human race, Black Wind Stream. There were countless seals arranged in the Black Wind Stream, which contained demons and enemies that couldn't be killed or were hard to kill since the ancient times. It was equivalent to a very high-level supreme prison. Due to the passage of time, the demonic chi in the black wind stream had become more and more powerful, causing the airflow that blew out from the gap to be black in color. This was how the name Black Wind Stream came about. Yi Chen and Supreme Fire's task was to patrol the Black Wind Stream and report to Supreme True Marshal immediately if they encountered any strange or troublesome problems. Yi Chen, you've just become a Supreme Master. The Black Wind Stream is a good place to sharpen your state of mind and will. Is that okay? Supreme True Marshal asked. Yi Chen knew that Supreme True Marshal was doing this for his own good, so he didn't refuse and agreed. After returning to Tianqian continent, Yi Chen told Su Jing and Murong Qingqing what to do. Then he went to the Black Wind Stream with Supreme Fire. The Black Wind Stream was a vast expanse of pitch-black darkness. Occasionally, a faint black airflow would blow past, and the space-time would creak. The closer one got to the Black Wind Stream, the denser the black air currents became. The wailing of ghosts and howling of wolves rang out incessantly. Those who did not have a strong state of mind or a strong will would suffer every second here. Supreme Yi, the Black Wind Stream is just ahead. Although Sovereign Lai Hua was a veteran sovereign, he was well aware of his own position. This time, it seemed as though he was the one leading Yi Chen on patrol. However, in the face of unexpected situations, Yi Chen had to take the lead. There was no other reason than that Yi Chen was stronger than him, and he was just an ordinary sovereign. Lai Hua, is there anyone alive in the Black Wind Stream? Yi Chen suddenly thought of something and asked. Sovereign Lai Hua stared blankly for a moment before replying, I don't think so. Even if there were, they would be evil demons that were imprisoned in there in the last 1,000,000 years. The evil demons from 1,000,000 years ago would have long since died in there. Nodding his head, Yi Chen glanced at the black air currents that blew past him. That's good. However, these air currents are not simple. The energy contained within the black air currents was very heterogeneous. Yi Chen had just collected a black air current and wanted to study it. However, he found that it was impossible to study. Once his soul power entered it, it was immediately corroded. When his sword energy entered it, it was also gradually transformed. This black air current seemed to contain a kind of chaotic law, turning all orderly energy into disorderly energy and merging with the black air currents. The black wind of the Black Wind Stream is more terrifying than anything else. Since ancient times, countless evil demons have died in the Black Wind Stream. After these evil demons died, their bodies merged with the Black Wind Stream. As time passed, the Black Wind Stream became a real evil demon graveyard. Even the heavenly law was corroded. Of course, as long as we are careful, there won't be any danger. Otherwise, Zhen Wu would not have sent me here. Sovereign Lai Hua smiled again. Soon, the two arrived at the entrance of the Black Wind Stream. The entrance of the Black Wind Stream was a huge space-time crack. It was like the mouth of a demon, with uneven edges. Inside the crack, black air currents roared and rushed out, sweeping in all directions. The two had to enter in order to patrol the Black Wind Stream, because it was inside the space-time. Sovereign Yi, be careful. Don't let go of the Black Wind token. Sovereign Lai Hua took out a black token and poured his Zhen Yuan into it. Instantly, a silver-black halo covered him. Understood. Yi Chen nodded and took out a black token as well. Under the protection of the silver-black halo, the two entered the space-time crack. Bush. Endless black air currents rushed towards the two like roaring water currents. However, with the silver-black halo, the black air currents seemed to have a life of their own as they went around it. After walking for about 15 minutes, the black air currents around them disappeared. The two arrived in front of a huge canyon, where torrential water flowed. This is the Black Wind Stream. Sovereign Lai Hua slowly let out a breath and said in a leisurely manner. Yi Chen looked over. The Black Wind Stream was huge, and its height was at least tens of billions of li. In the center of the canyon, a black stream was flowing. Although it was called a stream, it was only relative to the canyon. The width of the stream was at least a few billion li, and its depth was immeasurable. As for the walls of the canyon on both sides, there were countless caves with black smoke coming out of them. These black smoke rose up and converged together, turning into a black curtain that covered the sky. Obviously, The source of the black air currents was the black smoke. However, the black wind stream had a seal, so the black smoke couldn't wreak havoc below. Sovereign Yi, come with me. Supreme Flame brought Yi-Chin to the real entrance of the black wind stream, where there was a 3-story building that was 3,000 zhang tall. Each story was exactly 333 zhang tall. This will be our residence from now on. It's a completely different world inside that can satisfy all of our needs. Of course, we have to patrol every once in a while. This is a mission. Sovereign Lai Hua explained. Yi-Chin nodded and asked, how often do we patrol? We have to patrol once a year. The Black Wind token has a record of it, but it's not too troublesome. We only need about a month to patrol, and we still have 11 months to cultivate. Oh, that's fine. Yi-Chin thought that the patrols would be frequent. Since it's our first time here, let's do a patrol first. Sovereign Lai Hua suggested. Sure. Yi-Chin also wanted to familiarize himself with the situation of the Black Wind stream. He had a feeling that this was an unfriendly place, and he had to be careful in these 500 years. Follow me. The Lai Hua master flew into the air and started to move along the side of the canyon wall at a moderate speed, checking out the inside of the cave to see if there was anything unusual. Meanwhile, Yi-Chin followed right behind him. There were too many caves on the walls. After a day, the two of them had only checked 1/10 of the caves. No wonder it took them a month or so to finish checking. Chapter 1299. In the blink of an eye, half a month had passed. The two of them had explored the countless caves on one side of the Black Wind stream and started to patrol the other side. Supreme Yi, are you bored? Seeing that Yi-Chin didn't speak much, Supreme Raging Fire thought that he was bored. Yi-Chin shook his head. It's fresh. Every cave contains rich information. Although the information is messy, there are still some gains. There was no limit to learning. Yi-Chin didn't think that he didn't need to absorb other things after obtaining the essence of the 3 realms sovereign's martial arts. On the contrary, the more he knew, the more he wanted to know. The black smoke emitted from these caves might be evil to Supreme Raging Fire, but to Yi-Chin, the black smoke emitted from each cave was different. For example, some of the black smoke contained a trace of martial arts essence, some contained a trace of personal understanding, and some contained a trace of secret news. One must know that these caves were equivalent to individual prisons, each with an evil sovereign sealed within. Even if the sealed evil sovereign died, there would still be some information left behind. Oh, so it's like this. Supreme Raging Fire shook his head, a trace of worry suddenly appearing on his face. Yi-Chin didn't notice Supreme Raging Fire's expression. His attention was completely focused on the black smoke emitted from the caves. Soon, another week passed. How could this be? It shouldn't be like this. Could it be that I was wrong in the past? Impossible. On this day, a loud roar suddenly sounded in front of the two of them. This roar was countless times louder than thunder from a clear sky, causing the walls to tremble and rubble to tumble down. Supreme Raging Fire's face turned pale as he spat out a mouthful of blood. Obviously, the roar had shaken his mind to the point that his blood and chi were blocked. Yi-Chin was much better than Supreme Raging Fire, but he was still a little frightened. Raging Fire, who's in front? Yi-Chin thought that there was still someone in the cave who hadn't died. It's him! Supreme Raging Fire said with lingering fear. Who is it? Yi-Chin looked at Sovereign Lai Hua. Although he wasn't as outstanding as you, Supreme Yi, he wasn't too far off. At that time, he came to the Black Wind stream with another Supreme Martial Artist, preparing to complete the patrol mission that happens every 500 years. However, on the 350th year, he suddenly went crazy and killed another Supreme Martial Artist. This matter shocked all the other Supreme Martial Artists, so Supreme True Martial Artist and Supreme Golden Buddha personally came to capture him. However, no one expected that although Supreme True Martial Artist and Supreme Golden Buddha could defeat him, they couldn't capture him. Due to the special environment of the Black Wind stream, if the battle was too intense, a part of the seal might be destroyed. Therefore, Supreme True Martial Artist and Supreme Golden Buddha joined hands to cast the seal and sealed him in one of the caves. Yi-Chin was puzzled. Crazy? How could he have gone mad? Is this the first time something like this happened? Supreme Yi, to tell you the truth, just like you, he was also studying the information emitted from the black smoke. As time passed, he went crazy. Therefore, it's best that you don't study it anymore. These things are very strange, and human strength is limited. There's no way to integrate all the information. If you forcefully absorb it, it will only cause you to lose your mind and go berserk. After pondering for a while, Supreme Raging Fire decided to warn Yi Chen for his own safety. Thank you for the reminder. I'll take note. Yi Chen sized up Supreme Raging Fire and nodded. Actually, he had already noticed that a lot of the information in the black smoke was very chaotic. This kind of chaos wasn't just the order of the information, but a deeper level of chaos. It should be because it was contaminated by the chaos law. If one forcefully studied it, it would indeed cause the researcher to lose his mind. Of course, everything has its pros and cons. Studying the black smoke might make one a madman, but there was also a possibility that one's strength would increase by countless times. Sometimes, there was only a thin line between a madman and a genius. Soon, the two of them came to the cave where the roar came from. Supreme Raging Fire had already taken out the Black Wind token to prevent himself from being injured by the roar. Supreme Yi, be careful. Supreme Crazy's strength is very high. After 100,000 years, his strength might not be any weaker than Supreme True Martial. Supreme Raging Fire said when he saw that Yi Chen didn't take out the Black Wind token. Waving his hand, Yi Chen said, "I know what I'm doing." "Ha, it's all for naught. It's all for naught. 100,000 years of research was negated by a small discovery just now. Is it really that hard to become a legend rank? Do I, Tu Yuan, really not have the fate of becoming a legend rank?" There was no longer a roar coming from the cave. Instead, it was the mumbling of a person. It sounded very normal and logical, not like a madman at all. However, Yi Chen knew that madmen weren't always in a crazy state. Under normal circumstances, they were more normal than anyone else. However, it was precisely because of this that they were extremely threatening. Because you wouldn't know when they would go crazy. Perhaps, just a simple sentence would cause them to lose control of their emotions. "Supreme Yi, let's go." Supreme Raging Fire didn't want to stay here for another second. All right. There would be plenty of opportunities in the future. Just as Yi Chen was about to leave, Sovereign Kuang's voice suddenly came from inside the cave. "Is that a new Supreme outside? I can feel that your aura is very unfamiliar." Halting his steps, Yi Chen replied, "Yes, I am Yi Chen. My name is Tu Yuan. I think you've already heard about me from your companions. Don't be afraid. I'm sealed in this cave by Zhen Wu and the Golden Buddha. I can't come out, so I won't be a threat to you. If it's possible, can you help me look at the cave at the end of the Black Wind Stream?" "Supreme Yi, don't listen to him. He's already made one go crazy." Supreme Raging Fire's expression changed drastically. "Raging Fire, do you want to die?" Sovereign Kuang's voice turned gloomy. Although they couldn't see his face, they could see his cold, emotionless eyes and white teeth. "I'm sorry, I can't do that." Yi Chen flatly refused. "Then forget it. You can go." Sovereign Kuang's attitude towards Yi Chen was completely different from his attitude towards Supreme Raging Fire. Of course, Yi Chen didn't think that it was unintentional. Perhaps he was playing hard to get. When the two left the cave, Supreme Raging Fire's body was already soaked in sweat. "He can't come out. Why are you so afraid?" Yi Chen frowned and looked at Supreme Raging Fire. He felt that the other party was a disgrace to Supreme Raging Fire. Supreme Raging Fire didn't notice Yi Chen's expression. "You don't know, but in the past 100,000 years, there were many people who were affected by him and couldn't improve their strength. There was even someone like him who became a madman and committed suicide." The Golden Buddha said that although he was crazy, his martial Dao Yuan Shen was developing in a very strange way. It's best not to get close to him, or you'll be haunted by bad luck. Chapter 1300. After the first patrol mission was completed, the two returned to the 3-story building at the entrance of the Black Wind Stream. Supreme Lai Hua lived on the 2nd floor, while Yi Chen lived on the 3rd floor. There were many rooms on the 3rd floor, and each room was actually the entrance to a different space. Cultivation space. This space was very mystical. As long as one had enough primordial stones, they could condense a supreme battle avatar at the center of the cultivation space. It was said that this formation was set up by a human demigod, which was why it was so mystical. Of course, once the primordial stones were used up, the supreme battle avatar would disappear. Supreme battle avatars, from low to high, were divided into Level 1, Level 2, Level 3, Level 1 to Level 3 Supreme Battle Avatars corresponded to ordinary sovereigns, Level 4 to Level 6 Supreme Battle Avatars corresponded to powerful sovereigns, and Level 7 to Level 9 Supreme Battle Avatars corresponded to super sovereigns. Level 1 required 10 million primordial stones, Level 2 20 million, Level 3 30 million, Level 4 100 million, Level 5 200 million, Level 6 300 million, Level 7 1 billion, Level 8 2 billion, and Level 9 3 billion. It didn't seem much for sovereigns, but once the primordial stones were used up, the Supreme Battle Avatar would disappear immediately. If they wanted to condense it again, they would have to consume more primordial stones. After a long time, any sovereign wouldn't be able to bear it and would only use it occasionally. After spending 300 million primordial stones, Yichen condensed a Level 6 Supreme Battle Avatar. In terms of offensive and defensive strength, a Level 6 Supreme Battle Avatar was equivalent to a top-notch sovereign. Of course, in terms of overall strength, a Level 6 Supreme Battle Avatar was far inferior to a top-notch sovereign. Clang 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 clang. In the cultivation space, a figure flickered. Countless sparks flew from the Level 6 Supreme Battle Avatar, and the crisscrossing sword light almost enveloped it. After a long time, the Level 6 Supreme Battle Avatar automatically dissipated, and Yichen stopped attacking. My current strength should be at the level of a top-notch sovereign, but there's still a big gap between me and a super sovereign. The weakest super sovereign could easily suppress a peak sovereign, and the gap between the two was more than 1,000 times. In the blink of an eye, a year had passed. The second patrol began. Supreme Yi, this time, let's each patrol one side. This way it'll be faster. Supreme Lai Hua suggested. Okay, sure. Yichen nodded. The black wind stream was heavily sealed, and there was usually no danger. Even if there was danger, the two of them together might not be able to do anything. Just like that, Sovereign Raging Inferno patrolled the left side of the canyon wall, while Yichen patrolled the right side of the canyon wall. The right side of the canyon wall was where Sovereign Kuang was sealed. Once again, he arrived at the cave where the Mad Sovereign was sealed. Young man, I can feel that you want to see me again. Kuang Zun's voice floated out of the cave. Yichen did not hide his inner thoughts and said, I want to know, why did you kill your companion? Kuang Zun laughed out loud. There's no why. If you want to kill them, just kill them. It's very simple. Looks like you're really crazy. It doesn't matter if you're really crazy or pretending to be crazy. As long as you have enough strength, who would dare to say that you're crazy? In this world, strength is the truth. Everything else will change. Perhaps you're right, but it depends on how you get your strength and whether you can control it. Yichen was unmoved. Kuang Zun was silent for a while. You're different from the others. You look gentle on the outside, but you're actually cold on the inside. Even though you're cold, you're not completely emotionless. If I had your mentality back then, I wouldn't have been tempted. New Supreme, if you want to become stronger, you can study this black smoke. Of course, you don't have to study it. With your talent, you can still achieve great things. After saying that, Kuang Zun retracted his aura. Unknowingly, 20 years had passed. The study of the black smoke did not improve Yichen's sword skills much, but it did improve Yichen's martial Dao Yuan Shen. The martial Dao Yuan Shen was like a physical manifestation of a person's essence, qi, and soul. It could ignore the majority of attacks, but it could still inflict damage to the outside world. Yichen had a feeling that when the martial Dao Yuan Shen was cultivated to a certain level, it could completely leave the body and survive for a longer time. Amazing! In 20 years, your martial Dao Yuan Shen has grown so much. Kuang Zun's voice came. In the past 20 years, the two would have a conversation every year, and this time was no exception. This is a double-edged sword. If I'm not wrong, your body has already decayed, right? Yi Chen said slowly. Not yet. Of course, it's close. Since you know it's a double-edged sword, why do you still study it? Kuang Zun asked Yi Chen. Yi Chen said, I have a way to overcome it. The black smoke in the black wind stream contained chaotic and negative information. If one used this information to improve the martial Dao Yuan Shen, it would cause the connection between the martial Dao Yuan Shen and the body to split. As time passed, the body would gradually decay, and it would be difficult to recover. Kuang Zun's voice was slightly louder. Raise your martial Dao will to the 9th level. I've thought of that before, but it's not practical. That's because you have to improve your will before your fleshly body decays. If your fleshly body is already decaying, your will is strong, and your Yuan Shen is strong. Losing your fleshly body means nothing. So, only I can overcome this method. Yi Chen did not tell Kuang Zun why he could overcome it. It was because he had the Destruction Sword intent and the Immortal Sword intent. The two sword intents resonated, allowing him to improve faster. He was confident that he could advance his sword intent before his body decayed. Day after day, year after year, Yi Chen spent most of his time studying the black smoke, and his martial Dao Yuan Shen improved at a rapid pace. Gradually, Yi Chen noticed that his martial Dao Yuan Shen was becoming more tangible, and its color was turning dark green. Seems like I'm getting closer to the bottleneck. Yi Chen thought to himself. One day, Yi Chen's body felt like it was being electrocuted, and he felt weak. In the next second, his martial Dao Yuan Shen floated out uncontrollably. The martial Dao Yuan Shen shone brightly, and waves of terrifying pressure spread out. Then, the martial Dao Yuan Shen's color darkened, turning from dark green to bronze. The bronze light shone, and even the rules of heaven and earth rippled, as if they were twisting. This was the sign of breaking the limit of heaven and earth. Omniscient nature. With a thought, Yi Chen instinctively performed the omniscient nature. The omniscient nature that only had 1,000,000 transformations in the past had finally surpassed this limit, and it was moving towards countless transformations. Of course, compared to the real Three Realms Killing Fist, it was still many times weaker. The Three Realms Killing Fist had reached the level of simplification. Bronze Martial Dao Yuan Shun, complete. Chapter 1301. If martial skills, will, and domain were the software of a person, then essence, qi, and soul were the hardware of a person, and martial Dao Yuan spirit was the perfect embodiment of essence, qi, and soul. To surpass the limit of heavenly Dao, software alone was not enough. One's hardware had to keep up as well. For example, even if an ordinary life and death king had the knowledge of a supreme martial skill, he wouldn't be able to fully display it. If he were to do so, his entire body would be devoured by the martial skill, and he would die. Yi Chen had obtained the essence of the Three Realms Sovereign's martial skills, but he didn't know anything about martial Dao Yuan spirit. Therefore, he had always thought that as long as he slowly cultivated, boundless nature would surpass the limit of heavenly Dao sooner or later. But now that he thought about it, he realized that he was indeed wrong. Perhaps, the martial Dao Yuan spirit of the Three Realms Sovereign had long surpassed bronze grade and reached silver grade. As for the gold martial Dao Yuan spirit, according to the records, once it reached this grade, one would not be far from becoming a true god. Of course, there were still some differences between Yi Chen's bronze martial Dao Yuan spirit and ordinary bronze martial Dao Yuan spirit. Yi Chen's bronze martial Dao Yuan spirit was filled with some black threads, which gave off a strange aura. Seems like only the Destruction Sword intent and Immortal Sword intent can cut these black threads at the 9th step. Yi Chen's brows creased. He didn't regret studying the black smoke. If not for it, it would have taken him thousands of years of accumulation to raise his martial Dao Yuan spirit to bronze grade. Among humans, only True Martial Supreme and Golden Buddha Supreme had bronze grade martial Dao Yuan spirits. The others were far from it. Unbelievable! You raised your martial Dao Yuan spirit to bronze grade in such a short time? How did you do it? During another patrol, Kuang Zun discovered Yi Chen's abnormality. Luck. Yi Chen said. No, this is definitely not luck. The information is chaotic and complicated. Luck alone can't do anything. Letting out a sigh, Kwang Zun said, "The Yuan martial spirit is the foundation of a person. It can even be said to be our second life. The further you go, the more important the Yuan martial spirit becomes. However, you've only just started. In terms of quality, your bronze Yuan martial spirit is 100 times worse than mine. If you want to continue improving, the ordinary black smoke will be useless. Only the black smoke in the cave can help you improve." "You're trying to tempt me down," Yi Chen said directly. "Yes or no, you decide for yourself." Venerable Kwang did not say another word. After taking a deep look at the cave, Yi Chen could vaguely see a green shadow sitting in the cave after his martial primordial spirit reached the bronze level. Cultivation space. Yi Chen could easily suppress a 6th-grade sovereign battle puppet, and his strength was improving at a godly speed. When the 6th-grade sovereign battle puppet disappeared, Yi Chen formed a 7th-grade sovereign battle puppet. In terms of offense and defense, the 7th-grade sovereign battle puppet was equivalent to a slightly weaker Supreme. A powerful Supreme would definitely be in danger if they were hit head-on. Even the current Yi Chen didn't dare to underestimate it. He had to be cautious. Boom 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 boom, waves of air exploded, and sword rays crisscrossed. Yi Chen shuttled around the 7th-grade sovereign battle puppet, swinging the brilliant divine sword at it from time to time. The 7th-grade sovereign battle puppet's attack was the same as the 6th-grade sovereign battle puppet's attack. It was simpler, but the increase in power was terrifying. A simple punch could create a space-time storm, dissipating everything. Retreat. Using the boundless nature, Yi Chen's sword struck the 7th-grade sovereign battle puppet's chest, sending it flying. Of course, it was impossible to shatter it. In a battle of the same level, it was difficult to kill the opponent, even if the opponent was 1,000 times stronger. For example, if the Earth Demon Sovereign wanted to kill the Golden Buddha Supreme, he couldn't do it himself, so he could only rely on the power of the Saint Weapon. 1 sword, 2 swords. After gaining the upper hand, Yi Chen didn't give the 7th-grade sovereign battle puppet any chance. He kept attacking it until it ran out of energy and dissipated. My current strength should be equivalent to a slightly weaker Supreme. If he didn't have a 7th-grade Supreme battle puppet, it would be hard for him to know what level he was at. However, he was clear that although he was a lot stronger than a 7th-grade Supreme battle puppet, the battle puppet's overall strength was much weaker than a living Supreme being. A true Supreme being had many more tricks up their sleeves. Time to patrol again. For a Supreme, a year had passed too quickly. In the state of cultivation, one wouldn't even notice the passing of time. Should I take a trip to the cave? An idea popped up in Yi Chen's mind. The Black Wind Stream was divided into 2 parts. One part was the walls of the Black Wind Stream, and the other part was the cave at the end of the Black Wind Stream. In fact, they didn't need to patrol the cave. If there was anything strange, they could just report it to the true Martial Supreme. No wonder so many Supreme were affected by Lord Mad after coming in. Their strength couldn't improve, and some even went crazy. The willpower of Supremes was very strong, and it was hard for them to be tempted. There was only one way to tempt them, and that was strength. Yi Chen didn't know what the consequences of entering the cave would be, but he was very clear that he had already been affected by Mad Sovereign. On the small side, as long as he didn't enter the cave, Mad Sovereign's influence would be useless. On the big side, his willpower would be shaken, which would be fatal. Shaking his head, Yi Chen smiled bitterly. It seemed like his state of mind wasn't strong enough. With his current realm, he definitely couldn't go to the cave. The risk was too great. There would come a day when he would have no choice but to go. Your willpower is stronger than I thought. The stronger your willpower, the lower the risk of entering the cave. This time, Lord Mad only said one sentence to Yi Chen. Another year had passed. Lord Mad didn't say anything, but Yi Chen could feel that Lord Mad's eyes had become much colder. I really can't go to the cave. Sighing, Yi Chen left. In the years that followed, Yi Chen and Lord Mad didn't talk at all. Yi Chen also gave up on the idea of entering the cave. It was the 50th year since he entered the Black Wind Stream. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. In the Black Wind Stream, black whirlwinds howled. The entire place was covered in a thick black fog, and one couldn't even see their fingers. On the third floor of the building, Yi-Chen sensed something. He quickly left the training space and went outside the building. What's going on? Without any hesitation, Yi-Chen crushed the Black Wind token in his hand. Once the Black Wind token was broken, Supreme True Martial would immediately know that something big had happened in the Black Wind stream. With his speed, it wouldn't take long for him to get here. Suddenly, a cold light flashed on Yi-Chen's right, and it shot towards Yi-Chen. Clang! Yi-Chen immediately pulled out the brilliant divine sword and blocked the attack. Supreme Fire, it's you! Yi-Chen squinted his eyes and stared at Supreme Fire, who was exposed in the black fog. I'm not some Supreme Fire. The real Supreme Fire has been eaten by me. Supreme Fire's body and aura changed, and he turned into a strange Supreme. His flesh and blood were very strange. They were in a translucent state, as if they were made of jelly. At the end of the Black Wind stream, there was a powerful aura that was breaking free. Now, there was a strange Supreme in front of him. Yi-Chen suddenly understood. Chapter 1302. If the true Martial Sovereign or the Gold Buddha Sovereign were here, they would definitely recognize that this Supreme with a jelly-like body belonged to a very powerful and rare bloodline of the demons called the Hundred Faces Demon. The Hundred Faces Demon was even rarer than the Dark Witch and Dark Goddess bloodlines. It was even similar to the bloodline of the Great Demon King. Although the Hundred Faces Demon Man wasn't as powerful as the Great Demon King's bloodline, he had a unique talent. He could change the appearance of the person he ate, and even his aura, memory, and soul were exactly the same, without any flaws. Within the same level, the Hundred Faces Demon Man's identity would almost never be seen through. This was also the main reason why Supreme Raging Fire could hide from Supreme True Martial and sneak into the Black Wind stream. Yi-Chen naturally didn't know what bloodline the opponent had, but the demonic aura he emitted revealed his race identity. Obviously, he was from the demons. Yi-Chen, you are very good. If you join us, the demons, in the future, when the demons unify the entire universe, the human race will be under your control. Flawless Demon Sovereign smiled and suggested. Yi-Chen said coldly, this kind of temptation has no effect on me. You don't need to use this to stall for time. Stall for time? Hee, I am not the Lai Hua Sovereign, and you are not the True Martial Sovereign or the Gold Buddha Sovereign. Do you think I need to stall you? The corner of Flawless Demon Sovereign's mouth curled up as he mocked. Yes or no, you will know after you try. The black fog became thicker and thicker, and even his soul power was affected. Yi-Chen tightened his grip on the Huang godly sword and opened his holy netherworld eye to lock on the opponent's position. The smile on the corner of Flawless Demon Sovereign's mouth gradually disappeared. Whoosh, the black fog was pushed away, and Flawless Demon Sovereign instantly appeared on the right side of Yi-Chen. The dagger in his hand turned into a poisonous snake that stabbed towards Yi-Chen's heart. His body flashed, Yi-Chen easily dodged this attack and then slashed out with his sword. A blinding sword light exploded. Flawless Demon Sovereign realized that he could not dodge this sword no matter what. This sword had already sealed all his escape routes. Even time and space were locked. Clang! Sparks flew everywhere as Flawless Demon Venerable was blown away. His right arm was twisted in a weird way. At the critical moment, he used his dagger to block the sword, but the angle was a bit off, and he couldn't even exert a tenth of his strength. You're a super supreme being? Flawless Demon Sovereign looked at Yi-Chen hesitantly. Yi-Chen didn't reply. Instead, he attacked with a 5-element slash. So what if you're a supreme being? I'm one too. Flawless Demon Sovereign roared. He waved his dagger and a crystal lotus formed by chi blocked the 5-colored sword chi. Kala! Broken crystals splashed everywhere, and the crystal lotus was cut open. The 5-colored sword chi left a shallow sword mark on Flawless Demon Venerable's chest. There were strong and weak supremes. It was obvious that Flawless Demon Sovereign was weaker than Yi-Chen in terms of strength. Damn it! Flawless Demon Sovereign didn't expect Yi-Chen's progress to be this fast. Before entering the Black Wind stream, he had inquired about Yi-Chen's strength. He knew that Yi-Chen's strength was at most a peak powerful sovereign. Omniscient nature. Seeing that the 5 elements slash couldn't hit flawless demon sovereign directly, Yi Chen's sword aura changed. Omniscient nature, which had the most variations, was used. Ever since his Yuan spirit reached the bronze level, Yi Chen's omniscient nature had almost infinite variations. How could flawless demon sovereign block it? His body was hit by hundreds and thousands of sword attacks. Even the supreme armor couldn't defend against it. The destructive sword intent invaded his body. The next second, beams of sword light shot out of his body like a huge porcupine. Bastard break! Flawless demon sovereign crazily operated his demon art to force the destructive sword intent out of his body. Flawless thousand snakes pierced the heart. The dagger in flawless demon sovereign's hand turned into a black poisonous snake. He loosened his hand, and the black poisonous snake flew out. Along the way, it turned into millions of different poisonous snakes. Each of them went for Yi Chen's weak point as if they had a mind of their own. Yi Chen could tell that this attack contained the profound of yin and yang, as well as the profound of poison. As long as he was hit, he wouldn't feel good. 5-colored sword light filled the air. Yi Chen was surrounded by a 5-colored light ball. 5-element sword art. Rise to fall. Swoosh, swoosh. No matter how many poisonous snakes there were, they couldn't break through the 5-colored light ball. Instead, they disappeared automatically. Death cut. Suddenly, the 5-colored light ball merged into his body. Yi Chen slashed out with his sword. Millions of sword shadows spread out, stacking up the space and time like it was being cut into millions of pieces. Run! Flawless demon sovereign was shocked. In terms of offense and defense, he could barely be considered a supreme. But in terms of battle techniques, he was much weaker than Yi Chen. A wave of blood splashed out. It was the blood left behind by Flawless Demon Sovereign. Flawless Demon Sovereign flew towards the end of the black wind stream. Yi Chen thought about it and chased after him. There was still some time before Supreme True Martial arrived. The black wind token had been crushed, so he couldn't get out. It was better to go and see what was going on first. The closer he got to the end of the stream, the thicker the black mist became. It was like water, making people uncomfortable. Using the Netherworld Sacred Eye, Yi Chen followed closely behind Flawless Demon Sovereign. Vaguely, Yi Chen saw a huge shadow at the end of the stream. It was faint silver in color. Martial Path Yuan Shen. Yi Chen was shocked. Martial Yuan spirits were divided into 3 levels: bronze, silver, and gold. Once one's martial Yuan spirit reached the silver level, one would basically be at the level of a legendary paragon. He was definitely not a match for him. Although his opponent's martial Yuan spirit was dim and seemed to have suffered a lot of damage, a silver Yuan spirit was still a silver Yuan spirit. It was far inferior to a bronze Yuan spirit. Luckily, Yi Chen also saw the chains that locked the silver martial path Yuan Shen. The chains extended all the way to the cave at the end of the black wind stream, making clanking sounds. I should have known that there must be living people in the black wind stream. Although their bodies have decayed, their martial path Yuan Shen has survived for at least 1,000,000 years. Yi Chen's speed was extremely fast. Soon, he caught up with Flawless Demon Sovereign. Crackle! A golden lightning shot out from his eyes and hit Flawless Demon Sovereign. Flawless Demon Sovereign staggered, feeling dizzy. The Netherworld Sacred Eye combined with the Soul Attack had shocking destructive power. Flawless Demon Sovereign's speed couldn't help but slow down. Yi Chen, you are courting death. Flawless Demon Sovereign was furious. The opponent clearly knew that the end of the black wind stream was a forbidden area, but he still dared to chase. Yi Chen sneered. His body emitted a bronze light as he slashed at Flawless Demon Sovereign with all his strength. Clang! This sword was blocked by someone. It wasn't unblemished Demon Venerable, but a giant silver hand that reached out from the black mist. The sword light in his hand was like a mudfish that was trying its best to crawl in, but it couldn't break free. But the sword light was crushed, and a voice that seemed to come from the depths of hell resounded. How many years has it been? A junior actually dares to be so presumptuous in front of me. Is this the power of a silver martial path Yuan Shen? Yi Chen's pupils shrunk to a point as he quickly stopped. Chapter 1303. Seeing the silver hand crush Yi Chen's attack, unblemished Demon Emperor's face flashed with joy. He cupped his hands in the direction of the silver hand and said, "Congratulations, Sky Master, for leaving the cave. This is all thanks to the 10,000 demon blood crystal you brought. Sadly, there was only one. If there was one more, it could melt the seal on me." The voice in the black mist said. Unblemished Demon Emperor smiled awkwardly. He didn't know how to answer. The 10,000 demon blood crystal was the most valuable treasure of the demons. It was as precious as a supreme. Right now, the demons only had one. If the rescue failed, the demons would suffer a great loss. "Sky Master, this kid is a rare genius of the human race. If we take him back, we can make the human race hesitate," Unblemished Demon Emperor suggested to the figure in the black mist. "You are right." Clatter. The sound of iron chains rubbing against each other was heard. The black mist was pushed aside and a 20-meter-tall silver figure appeared in front of Yi Chen and Unblemished Demon Emperor. It was a terrifying demon that seemed to be made of silver. Its eyes shone with green light. If one looked closely, they would see that it didn't have a physical body. The body in front of them was a highly concentrated martial path Yuan spirit. There were a total of 9 chains on his body. There was 1 on his head, 1 on each shoulder, 1 on each arm and leg, and 2 on his spine. The 9 chains were like 9 poisonous snakes, deeply piercing into his body. The other end of the chains was connected to a metal ball. The metal ball was engraved with countless runes, each the size of an ant. As soon as this demon appeared, one of its eyes locked onto Unblemished Demon Emperor and the other locked onto Yi Chen. It was very strange. 100 Transformation Demon Emperor, how rare. There weren't any in my era. The left eye shifted its gaze away from Flawless Demon Sovereign and focused all of its attention on Yi Chen. The invisible pressure increased. Yi Chen felt like there was an ancient mountain pressing down on him. It was hard to even move a finger. "I have to wait for true Martial Supreme to come." Taking a deep breath, Yi Chen calmed himself down. Even though this martial Yuan spirit was an antique, true Martial Supreme had a saint item, so he wasn't afraid of it. "Or you?" Yi Chen asked calmly. The demon laughed out loud. "Based on your soul aura, you are indeed less than 1,000 years old. You are a genius and you have the right to know my name. Remember, I am Celestial Venerable Rot Demon. Now, follow me." As he spoke, Empyrean Corrupt Devil waved his hand. His right hand was like a 5-fingered mountain that enveloped Yi Chen. 5 elements slash. Yi Chen bellowed, and the 5-colored sword Qi slashed towards his opponent. Clang. Sparks flew everywhere. His opponent's right hand was many times tougher than Yi Chen had imagined. The 5 elements slash could not break through his opponent's defense at all, not even leaving a white mark. If it was any other enemy, even if Yi Chen couldn't beat them, he was confident he could avoid the first strike. But Empyrean Corrupt Devil's simple wave contained profound mysteries that couldn't be dodged at all. Yi Chen knew that the gap between the two of them was too big, so big that he couldn't use battle skills to make up for it. Just as Yi Chen was about to be grabbed, the surging 5-colored sword light spread out, turning into a giant 5-colored ball of light. The silver hand entered the range of the 5-colored sword light, and its speed and power dropped by a lot. It was like it was stuck in a swamp. Interesting. Heavenly Venerable Corrupt Devil didn't mind it at all. He slightly increased the power in his right hand. Immediately, the 5-colored sword light was distorted, and the 5-colored light sphere was compressed again and again. Eventually, it turned into a huge sphere with a diameter of 30 meters. The huge sphere wrapped around Yi Chen, and the silver hand was about to withdraw. "Monster, let go." At that critical moment, a bronze light pierced through the silver hand. "Who is it?" Empyrean Corrupt Devil raised his head and looked into the depths of the black mist. Unblemished Demon Lord seemed to think of something, and his face was a little nervous. A black hole appeared in the black mist, and a burly middle-aged man more than 15 feet tall came out. He held a bronze mace in his hand, and a vast power was emitting from it. Supreme True Martial. Seeing that it was Supreme True Martial, Yi Chen let out a sigh of relief. Supreme True Martial was a peak supreme, and he also had a divine weapon. It shouldn't be a problem for him to deal with a silver martial path Yuan spirit. Yichen, are you okay? What happened? Supreme True Martial looked at Yichen. He still valued Yichen a lot. The human race was at an absolute disadvantage now, and they needed to rely on a genius like Yichen to turn the tide. What they had lost now, they would get back one day. Supreme Raging Fire is the transformation of supreme demons. He used the 10,000 demon blood crystal to release this demon, and this demon is Supreme Corrupt Devil. Be careful. Yichen retreated behind Supreme True Martial and warned. Supreme Corrupt Devil? Supreme True Martial was deep in thought. On the other side, Unblemished Demon Lord said to Supreme Corrupt Devil, Supreme, this is the #1 Supreme of the human race, Supreme True Martial. He has a divine weapon, the True Martial Divine Mace. Supreme Corrupt Devil was still brooding over the fact that his right hand had just been pierced. 2 million years have passed, and a little Supreme has become the #1 Supreme of the human race. It seems that the human race isn't having a good time. But your divine weapon is very sharp. It's a waste to have it in your hands. Come here. Facing Yichen, Heavenly Venerable Corrupt Devil had only used 30 to 40% of his strength. But now, he brought out more than 90% of his strength. With him as the center, a silver-white radiance erupted. Amidst the endless radiance, a fist punched out, corroding space-time. The fist speed was astonishing. Supreme Corrupt Devil, the legendary supreme of demons from 2 million years ago. So it's him. Supreme True Martial was knowledgeable, so he quickly learned who Supreme Corrupt Devil was. Of course, even if he knew, Supreme True Martial wasn't afraid. Right now, his opponent was in a martial path Yuan Shen state and was sealed. He could only use 30 to 40% of his power. Plus, after being sealed for so many years, his essence, energy, and soul must have been worn down. More importantly, he had a divine weapon. With a divine weapon, he didn't need to be afraid of his opponent. Clang. Supreme True Martial's mace broke the opponent's fist. He didn't retreat a single step. Eat my corrosive god fist. Supreme Corrupt Devil's right hand turned from silver to pure green. Wherever the green fist passed, green slime dripped down, corroding the ground of the black wind stream. In addition, the green fist wind rushed towards Supreme True Martial, as well as Yichen, who was behind Supreme True Martial. What a powerful fist technique! Yichen was startled. Heavenly Venerable Decay Devil's corrosive god fist was certainly inferior to the 3 realms killing fist, but the gap was not too big. The fist energy of this fist transformed into poisonous gas that could corrode all living things in the world, including yin and yang. World Tribulation. Supreme True Martial didn't dare to be careless in the face of Supreme Corrupt Devil's all-out fist. He used the 6th of the True Martial 7 calamities. The 4 profound meanings of earth, water, fire, and wind fused together to form the light of primal chaos. It had the power to destroy the world and rebuild the universe. Chapter 1304. Pop, 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 pop. There was no earth-shattering sound, but one could see green bubbles and turbid bubbles in the black mist. When the 2 bubbles collided, they immediately disappeared. Heavenly Master Corrupt Devil was no match for the power of the True Martial Divine Truncheon, and he was sent flying. His body was riddled with holes, like a piece of cheese on fire. True Martial Supreme, on the other hand, only took 3 steps back. He had the upper hand. Damn it! Empyrean Corrupt Devil's face was unsightly. 2 million years had passed, and he had long since forgotten about the power of a saint item. But now, the True Martial Divine Swordbreaker showed him that a saint item was indeed a saint item, and that it could help its wielder fight beyond realms. Human Calamity Tribulation. True Martial Supreme gained the upper hand in one move, and he followed up with the 5th of the True Martial 7 calamities, the Man Calamity Tribulation. In a flash, True Martial Supreme split into 4, and the 4 figures surrounded Corrupt Devil Holy Master. Each True Martial Supreme was using his full strength, and there was not the slightest bit of falsehood in his attacks. They attacked Corrupt Devil Holy Master in the center. Sky Corrosion. Empyrean Rotten Demon roared out loud. He punched upwards and then punched downwards. In the next moment, green shockwaves superimposed over each other, forming a green nebula that enveloped him. Supreme True Marshal's attack landed on the nebula, emitting crackling sounds. Soon, the nebula was riddled with holes. A bronze light pierced through the nebula, piercing through Empyrean Rotten Devil's chest. Junior, one day, I will make you wish you were dead. Knowing that he couldn't beat True Marshal Supreme, Heavenly Master Rot Devil's body suddenly turned into a silver storm that swept unblemished Demon Sovereign inside. Along the way, the black mist was pushed away, blocking True Marshal Supreme's vision. Yichen, you stay here? How could True Marshal Supreme let Heavenly Master Rot Devil escape from the black windstream? Once he did, it would be a disaster for the human race. True Marshal Supreme pushed his true yuan to the limit, and the stars around him flickered. He shot toward the silver storm like an arrow piercing through the clouds. The two soon arrived at the entrance of the black windstream. Boom! Even from far away, Yichen could hear the sound of the collision. When Yichen rushed over, only Supreme Marshal was left at the entrance. Corrupt Heavenly Master and Flawless Demon Master had disappeared without a trace. Supreme True Marshal said in a deep voice, I didn't expect the black windstream to be in trouble while I was in charge. I also have to take half of the responsibility. If Yichen insisted on patrolling the black windstream with Sovereign Inferno, it wouldn't be so easy for the other party to release Empyrean Rot Devil. Of course, one could be a thief for 1,000 days, but not a thief for 1,000 days. Unless Yichen was always by Sovereign Inferno's side, the other party would still have a way to release Empyrean Rot Devil. Supreme True Marshal waved his hand. This has nothing to do with you. I was careless. It's a pity that I didn't kill that 100 Faces demon. For Supreme True Marshal, the 100 Faces demon was a bigger threat than Corrupt Devil. The seal on Corrupt Devil's body hadn't been removed, and he had been hit several times by the True Marshal Divine Mace. His strength had been reduced by many folds. Even with the help of treasures, it would take hundreds of years for him to recover. But the 100 Faces demon was different. He could change the appearance and aura of the person he ate. If he mixed in with the Supreme of the Human Clan, the Barbarian Clan, or the Giant Clan, the chaos would be even more terrible. Then what should we do next? Yichen could feel Supreme True Marshal's pressure. The great war between humans and demonic beasts was imminent, and now, a corrupt devil heavenly sovereign and 100 transformation demon man had appeared, adding snow to the human race. As the pillar of the human race, Supreme True Marshal had to withstand the pressure. No matter how anxious he was, he had to maintain his composure, lest he infect others. Different situations call for different actions. Continue to patrol the black windstream. You'll be fine alone, right? Supreme True Marshal let out a breath and looked at Yichen. Yichen said, Don't worry. I'll be fine. It's good that there are no problems. In this period of time, you cultivate well. Leave the rest to me. With these words, Supreme True Marshal took out a black wind token and handed it over. Before leaving, Supreme True Marshal told Yichen not to talk too much with Mad Lord and not to enter the cave. Even if he did enter, he shouldn't go too deep. There were many unknown dangers. The cave? Supreme True Marshal's words made Yichen think. Although Supreme True Marshal reminded him not to enter the cave, he didn't forbid him from doing so. Outside the Black Wind Stream, Supreme True Marshal thought to himself, both Supreme Golden Buddha and I have entered the cave. Although it's dangerous and we might become the second Mad Lord, it's also an opportunity. I hope it doesn't disappoint me. Supreme True Marshal and Supreme Golden Buddha sighed. Mad Lord had become like this because he was too eager for success. If he had been more careful and didn't go too deep into the cave, he would have been able to resist the temptation. Even if he wasn't as strong as he was now, he wouldn't be too far off. Unfortunately, the days in the Black Wind Stream weren't boring. As usual, Yichen spent most of his time studying the black smoke, trying to improve his bronze martial yuan shen. After decades of observation, Yichen found that the closer the cave to the entrance of the Black Wind Stream, the lower the strength of the sealed demons. Of course, These demons were long dead, leaving behind only a wisp of demonic aura. The cave where Mad Lord was sealed was in the middle of the black wind stream. It wasn't too strong, only at the level of a super supreme. In the caves behind him, there were some caves that emitted black smoke that made Yi Chen's heart palpitate, not to mention the cave at the end of the black wind stream. There should be a powerful legendary supreme in the cave. Yi Chen guessed. Soon, another 20 years passed. In the cultivation space, Yi Chen was fighting with the level 8 supreme battle puppet. The level 8 supreme battle puppet was equivalent to a mid-level super supreme. In the process of fighting, Yi Chen gradually realized what he was lacking. The biggest one was naturally his physical defense, but there was nothing he could do about it. He wasn't the Golden Buddha Supreme. The Golden Buddha Supreme's Golden Body 9 refinement stage allowed him to ignore most attacks. Only a saint weapon could deal fatal damage to him. A body refinement stage cultivates body refinement martial arts with twice the results with half the effort. But if I create my own sword body, it won't be too far off. An ordinary sword body was nothing to a sovereign. For example, the bronze sword body or the platinum sword body. These sword bodies were just special abilities that came with cultivation techniques. Yi Chen wanted to create a sword body similar to the Golden Body 9 refinement stage. Of course, he had to take things one step at a time. In the beginning, he only needed to create a prototype, and he would gradually perfect it in the future. To create a powerful sword body, Yi Chen relied on nothing but the body refinement information contained in the black smoke. With the countless body refinement information and Yi Chen's own accumulation, he had a certain degree of confidence. Chapter 1305. Clang, 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 clang. This was a world of swords. Countless swords were stabbed into the ground, and countless swords floated in the air. There were big and small swords. The small ones were like daggers, the big ones were like mountains, and the big ones were like giant dragons. The auras of the swords were also different. Some were cold, some righteous, some domineering, some untamed, and some low-key. These swords were all from Yi Chen's collection. From low-grade swords to emperor-grade swords, there were everything, and there were hundreds of thousands of them. Sitting in the center of the countless swords, Yi Chen closed his eyes, and his body naturally emitted sharp sword qi. Gradually, the sword qi coordinated with Yi Chen's breathing, expanding and contracting as if it had a spirit of its own. I have the immortal sword soul, and my soul has the immortal attribute. If I can make my body also have the immortal attribute, and refine it into a sword body, the limit of this sword body will be able to match the Golden Body 9 transformations in the future, or even surpass it. A sword body couldn't be created just because one wanted it to be. But before one created it, one had to have a concept of whether the limit of the sword body was big enough, and whether there was a possibility of success. Pooh, 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 pooh. The sound of Yi Chen's breathing wasn't loud, but the movement it caused was not small at all. With Yi Chen as the center, a tide spread out, and as the power of the tide swept out, countless swords in the sky and on the ground trembled, as if something was about to break out of the swords. I will forge my body with immortality, condense. Yi Chen opened his eyes, and sword light shot out in all directions. His eyes were unprecedentedly sharp. The moment Yi Chen opened his eyes, countless sword shadows shot towards Yi Chen from all directions. These sword shadows were not physical, but were the essence of the countless swords in the surroundings. It was like the essence, qi, and spirit of ordinary cultivators, or the martial arts yuan spirit of a paragon. The essence of a sword was extremely important. If a sword was damaged, it could be repaired, but if the essence was damaged, then it would be difficult to repair. If all the essence was lost, then the sword would become a pile of scrap metal. As the sword essence entered his body, the surface of Yi Chen's skin blossomed with a cold light, like steel that had been tempered hundreds and thousands of times. When all the sword essence entered his body, Yi Chen involuntarily floated up. The shadow of a huge sword enveloped Yi Chen. At the same time, Yi Chen's aura reached its peak, containing the charm of piercing through the heavens and severing time and space. Buzz. 1, 2, 3. 3 ancient sword marks flashed across Yi Chen's body and disappeared into his body. Gently landing on the ground, Yichen muttered to himself, "This is too amazing." It was clearly a sword body that I created, but the development after that was beyond my expectations. It naturally contains sword marks. 3 sword marks, it should be the 3rd level of the Immortal sword body. This sword body that Yichen created was called the Immortal sword body. Originally, Yichen was still pondering how to divide the Immortal sword body into levels. He didn't expect that the Immortal sword body would naturally contain sword marks, which saved him a lot of trouble. As for why the Immortal sword body needed to absorb the sword essence, it was mainly because Yichen wasn't a supreme body refiner, so his physical body wasn't strong enough. Only with enough sword essence could he have enough endurance. Otherwise, the Immortal sword body wouldn't be able to continue to develop. If he wanted to have the best of both worlds, he had to have some tricks. Raising the index and middle fingers of his right hand, Yichen pointed a sword finger at his arm. Clang! Sparks flew everywhere. Yichen's arm was extremely hard as if it was made of gold and iron. But then, Yichen exerted a little force, and a mark was still left on his arm, causing blood to flow. Rice should be eaten bite by bite. Yichen was already very satisfied with the defensive effect of the 3rd level of the Immortal sword body. After all, the 3rd level couldn't be compared to the 7th or 8th level of the 9 turns golden body. Days passed, and a year later, Yichen barely cultivated the Immortal sword body to the peak of the 3rd level. It's too difficult. I didn't expect that creating a body-refining martial art would be so much more difficult than creating a supreme martial art. That's right, as long as one's perception is high, creating a supreme martial art isn't difficult. But to create a body-refining martial art, one needs enough knowledge, which is not enough to rely on perception. Do I have to enter the cave? Yichen frowned. Forget it, I still haven't understood the black smoke outside, so I'm not in a hurry. Yichen decided to think about it a little more. Just like that, another 3 years passed. During these 3 years, Yichen's Immortal sword body reached the peak of the 4th level. 10 years later, the Immortal sword body reached the 5th level. The 5th level of the Immortal sword body could already resist the attack of a grade 5 supreme puppet of battle. The starting point of the Immortal sword body was very high. The 1st level could resist the attack of a grade 1 supreme puppet of battle, the 2nd level could resist the attack of a grade 2 supreme puppet of battle, and the 5th level could resist the attack of a grade 5 supreme puppet of battle. Of course, whether it was the 9 turns golden body or the Immortal sword body, one had to wear the supreme armor to resist the attack. Only with the supreme armor could one resist the attack. Looks like I have to go to the cave. At the 5th level of the Immortal sword body, it was hard to move forward. Yichen clearly knew that this was a cognitive barrier, and it was very easy to break it, which was to obtain more knowledge. On this day, Yichen finished patrolling the caves on both sides of the Black Wind Stream and flew toward the end of the stream. Soon, Yichen arrived at the end of the Black Wind Stream. There was a black vortex here, and endless black smoke was surging out of it. The information was very chaotic. Yichen studied it for a while, and his head was swollen. There was too much information, and it was as if the knowledge of countless people had been mixed together and stirred violently. It was impossible for him to study it even if he wanted to. After a slight hesitation, Yichen's figure flashed, and he plunged into the black vortex. It was as if he had gone from light to darkness. Yichen felt that he had come to another world, another universe. It was not pitch black, but rather a dim world. He couldn't feel the existence of the heavenly Tao law, and there was only nothingness and silence, a deathly silence that could make people panic. After walking for a long time, Yichen came to a dark valley. There were not many caves in the valley, and black smoke was surging out of these caves. What a thick smoke! Yichen's eyes narrowed. This black smoke was more than 10 times thicker than the black smoke outside, and some were even 100 times thicker. It was like a long black dragon, roaming around. Based on the principle of proximity, Yichen began to study the black smoke closest to him. The black smoke contained a lot of information, but it was a pity that there were many gaps in it. It was likely that the existence sealed in these caves had died for too long, and even the information had begun to fade. Even so, The information left behind by the legendary Supremes was terrifying. The life of every legendary Supremes was a legendary history, and it would take more than 100 years to finish. 1. 2. Yi Chen was only interested in the body refinement information and martial Dao Yuan Shin information. He chose to ignore the rest. However, the information was too chaotic, and Yi Chen more or less absorbed a lot of useless information. This information contained a demonic nature, as if there was a voice telling something in Yi Chen's heart. Almost there. Yi Chen maintained a clear mind at all times. He didn't want to become a madman like Sovereign Kuang. Chapter 1306. Every time he entered the cave, he would leave at the right time. He would never stay a second longer just because he was in high spirits. This time, it was a quarter, and the next time, it would be 2 quarters. He believed that it would not happen in a day for the Mad Lord to go from normal to crazy. After all, it would take more than a day for the Mad Lord to go crazy. The black smoke in the cavern contained much more information than the outside world. 1 wisp of black smoke was equivalent to thousands of wisps of smoke in the outside world. Moreover, the information was deeper and closer to the essence. Unknowingly, Yi Chen's immortal sword body had reached the peak of the 5th level from the early stage. At the 5th layer of the immortal sword body, the sword energy would be consumed very quickly when resisting the attacks of a 5th-grade sovereign battle puppet. At the 5th layer, the sword energy would be several times better than at the middle stage, and at the late stage, it would be several times better. At the peak stage, it would be hundreds of times better than at the early stage. But what made Yi Chen smile bitterly was that the peak of the 5th level of the immortal sword body was close to Yi Chen's limit. If he wanted to continue, he would need to absorb more sword essences or improve his spirit body greatly. Otherwise, he would be stuck at the peak of the 5th level forever. Absorb the sword essence of the Huang Divine Sword? A thought flashed through Yi Chen's mind. The sword essence of a supreme sword was undoubtedly much more condensed. 1 sword could surpass the countless sword essences he had absorbed before. No, there aren't many supreme swords in the human race. Absorbing 1 is 1 less. Let's wait until I can forge a supreme sword. In the beginning, Yi Chen planned to win by quantity. Although the immortal sword body could not be improved any further, Yi Chen did not give up on studying this information. As long as he accumulated enough information, it would be even more powerful in the future. At the same time, Yi Chen began to focus on improving his martial Yuan Shin. 1 was internal while the other was external, both equally important. There are more and more black threads. After entering the cavern, Yi Chen's martial Yuan Shin improved rapidly, from the early bronze stage to the middle bronze stage. One should know that the improvement of the martial Yuan Shin was the most difficult. It needed time to settle. The true martial supreme and the golden Buddha supreme were the pillars of the human race, but their martial Yuan Shin was only at the bronze level. Of course, as the martial path Yuan Shin improved rapidly, more and more black threads appeared on it. They looked like the meridians of the martial path Yuan Shin, but they also looked like a huge net that bound the martial path Yuan Shin. Yi Chen tried to analyze these black strands and found that they were extremely intelligent and not under his control. Yi Chen guessed that these black strands should be a heterogeneous primordial martial spirit. Once the heterogeneous primordial martial spirits were strong enough, Yi Chen's own primordial martial spirit would gradually be replaced by them. At that time, Yi Chen would no longer be the real Yi Chen, but a completely different Yi Chen. Find a way to let me out. I can upgrade your martial primordial spirit to the silver level. For the past few days, a voice had been lingering in his mind. A silver martial Dao primordial spirit. Even a legendary sovereign might not be able to possess one. With a silver martial Dao Yuan spirit, it's easy for you to live for a few million years. Such a long time is enough for you to become a demigod. Without my help, it'll take you at least 100,000 years to upgrade your martial Dao Yuan spirit to the silver level, maybe even longer. Noisy. Yi Chen's response was simple. He used the destruction sword will to kill the heterogeneous primordial spirit. Every time a heterogeneous primordial spirit appeared, he would kill it. Fortunately, he had the 8th-rank destruction sword will. On this day, 2 guests came to the Black Wind Stream, Supreme Xuanhe and Supreme Ananda. They were the disciples of Supreme True Martial and Supreme Golden Buddha, respectively. They were also the ones who made Supreme True Martial and Supreme Golden Buddha feel the most at ease. They had been patrolling the Black Wind Stream many times. Supreme Yi, Master asked us to replace you. Supreme Xuanhe explained the purpose of their visit. Supreme Ananda put his palms together and said, Supreme Yi, if you want to come in the future, you can go to the Supreme Pavilion and summon Martial Uncle True Martial. All right, I'll leave the rest to you. Yi Chen nodded. He was planning to leave the Black Wind Stream. The Immortal sword body needed more sword essences to upgrade. After leaving the Black Wind Stream, Yi Chen didn't go to the 9 Revolution Stars Tianxin continent. Instead, he went to the Vermilion Bird Star region's Waterbird Star. The Waterbird Star was a level 8 life planet with a diameter of 500 million miles. In the entire Vermilion Bird region, there were only a dozen or so level 8 life planets. Above it were the Vermilion Bird Star, the Golden Crow Star, and a few other level 9 life planets. In the distance, Yi Chen saw the Waterbird Star. The Waterbird Star looked very beautiful. It was blue in color, like Mercury. The land area was very small, only taking up about 10 to 20% of the star. Rather than calling it a continent, it was more like a large island in the ocean. Of course, the Waterbird Star was big enough. A large island was as big as a small life planet. The Waterbird Star had a total of 36 continents and countless islands. The Yi family lived on the Waterbird continent, while the Dusk Sword sect lived on the Waterfall continent. The Waterbird continent was undoubtedly the richest continent on the Waterbird Star. In this world, there were many ordinary people. They didn't need to cultivate. They just wanted to earn more money and enjoy life. The light blue sky, the crystal clear sea, and the white sand made Paradise Bay a famous beach for the rich on the Waterbird Star continent. Those who came here were either rich or powerful. Each of them had a luxurious puppet ship that flew past the sky. Yi Chen could see countless people living here. The life of an ordinary person isn't bad. Yi Chen's mind flashed with his past and present lives. With a flash of light, Yi Chen disappeared without a trace. Ordinary people wouldn't be able to sense Yi Chen's existence. The Waterbird Star continent not only had the word Waterbird in its name, but it was also shaped like a waterbird. The Yi family's residence was at the head of the Waterbird Star continent, where the environment was the best. The current Yi family had begun to display the demeanor of a great family. After 700 years of development, the population alone had broken through 10 million. Many of the Yi family's disciples with relatively high potential knew that they had no hope of breaking through to life and death realm, so they began to focus on marrying and having children, hoping that their descendants would be able to break through to life and death realm. After all, in such a big family, one couldn't speak without reaching life and death realm. Only by becoming a life and death king would one's parents and descendants receive better treatment. This was the case for both families and races. Resources were limited, and they had to rely on themselves. The beak of the Waterbird Star continent was called the Beak Bay. This was one of the 3 great training bases of the Yi family. 1/3 of the Yi family's disciples were trained here. If their talent was high enough, they would be sent to the Dusk Sword sect to receive the training of the sect. Countless people in the Yi family had their eyes fixed on this place, hoping that their children would have an outstanding performance. On the shore, a young man and a woman were taking a stroll. The young man was handsome, with sharp eyebrows and starry eyes. The woman was Yi Xiaoxiao. After 700 years, she hadn't changed a bit. Xiaoxiao, can you tell me about your big brother? The young man turned his head and said with expectation. Yi Xiaoxiao helplessly said, when my big brother comes back, you can just meet him. The young man was startled. How would I dare? Indeed, he didn't dare. Yi Chen was a sovereign, and the two of them weren't on the same level. Even if he was Yi Chen's future brother-in-law in name. Coward! Yi Xiaoxiao stuck out her tongue. Suddenly, her gaze froze and she shouted, Big brother! You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.